Let's look at the old Tales of the Arabian Nights. I don't have the new one. This is an Eric Goldberg game. Old SPI guy went over to West End. Trying to think if he did anything over at Victory Games. I don't think so. Anyway. There are some differences between the versions. Like I said, I don't have the new one. The reason I picked this is I recently recompiled my list of, thumbs and Geek Gold contributions for my not yet played list, and every now and then I do that. And, someone threw a decent chunk of Geek Gold at this one. It doesn't have a lot of thumbs, but it suits my need right now. Now, this is a game I always enjoyed a lot, but it does have its flaws, and we'll see some of them when we get to the playing and the review, and maybe during the rules explanation as well. The reason this was so cool was, late in a gaming session, or if you had people who weren't really into something very heavy, this was a nice, light little game that was more interesting to play than Talisman. It's got some... Played at the best, it's really a luck-based game more than anything else. Played it, or actually, perhaps one where you immerse yourself in the story more than anything else. Played at its worst, you've got people who know the game and know what to do, and are just taking the options that they know win, in any given circumstance. What it's going to be about is moving around on this very light little board here and trying to improve your character, generally to get to certain victory conditions. Now, the base game has one type of victory condition, which is sort of like Magic Realm, Careers, whatever, where you pick story points and destiny points. You pick an amount of each, and they have to add up to 20 to win. That's the core victory conditions. There's two others, though. There's a quest game where you have to complete a series of quests, essentially, and then you can win. And then there's finally the merchant game, which is really weird, where you're more interested in getting wealth. And you can use this little chart here to deliver goods to different places. Now, that little chart is not available to anyone who's not playing the merchant game. But likewise, quests generally aren't available to anyone who isn't playing the quest game. Sometimes they come up within the game itself. The core of the game is going to be run by this paragraph book. When you meet encounters through these cards or whatever, or other means, you'll end up looking up and being given choices, which you read aloud the storyline so far and the choices, and then you convert them. Then you look over on this reaction matrix to decide what you're going to do about that choice. And there's some mechanisms in play to make that not completely deterministic. There's some randomness in there, and then you see what happens to you. Okay. And that's about it, really. You have this pile of statuses here, different ways of expressing them. They get marked up on this chart up here for, things that have happened to you that affect you. So, hey, I'm married, or I'm insane, or, sex changed, or whatever. I remember my friend Dave, Clueless Dave, when I said diseased, he thought I said deceased. He's like, well, that's pretty extreme. You actually can't die in the game. You just keep wandering around, and terrible things happen to you sometimes where it's worse than being dead. Like, being dead, you probably would restart a new character. No, not in this game. You just keep suffering. Again, there's differences in how you play it. I'm going to play a more advanced version of the game. I'm not sure how advanced, but all options are going to be open. Well, one of the things that means is that there are multiple, there's the possibility of having multiple statuses. In the very basic game, if you have a status and you get a different status, you lose the other status, and I think that's pretty damn cheap, Well, I was married, but now I'm the Sultan, you know. Nah, you're probably still married. In addition to that, you make a selection at the beginning of the game of certain skills. And these are all different things that you can, you know, have as abilities or whatever, you know, like seamanship or seduction or whatever. There are some limits on what you can take. I know you can't take major magic at the beginning of the game. You get a choice of 3 skills at the beginning of the game. And they're what really kind of define your character. Let me go through the rules. I think I've captured a lot of the game description right there, but I do want to familiarize myself with the rules and give you guys something of a better grounding in how the actual mechanisms work. You know, I could explain this in more detail, but I think I have a better chance of doing it here. So the first thing is actually the setup, and you start out poor. You start out with destiny and story points at 0. Oh, one more thing I didn't mention. You can find some magic objects, treasures, and they go in a cup. There's actually a need for another cup if somebody's playing a merchant in order to handle the pathways that are going to traverse the merchant display. Okay. So I should talk about some of the additional games. So one of the options of the game, which I can't do solitaire, is the storytelling game. I don't know if I've actually ever played this. It is sort of a storytelling game anyway, because you're reading these paragraph descriptions, and you'll see this in play to one another and giving choices. So it's a choose-your-own-adventure type storytelling game. But the true storytelling game insists that players act out the adventure items as they happen, and people take different roles on, and then the players vote on whether or not, you know, the people taking the roles on have done a good job, and if they do, they get additional bonuses towards winning the game. That's kind of a weird thing. It's more of a party game type facilitator to this. It looks like it would be a lot of fun though. The adventure rules, that's what we're going to be playing. It holds 6 players. I'm only playing with 4 because, well, it's going to be quite a burden even with 4. I thought about 3, but then I thought, well, I got more chance for character choices in 4. It does have solitaire rules where you're kind of playing against the game on a time limit or something. I never thought they were terribly interesting, mainly because this isn't a competition. If you try to play it too much as a competition, you're going to ruin the game, especially if you've played it before. So it doesn't have a lot of replayability as a solo game because you do learn how to optimize it. And then the adventure rules are mainly the additional rules that I'm going to be pretty much playing with. So that's more or less what I'm going to be adding to the game. Okay, at the beginning of the game, you have to choose your character initially. And one of the important things is what gender you are. That can affect what happens. And each character's color has 2 characters on it, and well, you know, you kind of pick you might design your character based on what you know of that personage. So like Alibaba here, you know certain things about him. You might choose to try to live that kind of life as your character, or not. You might just seek out skills that you've never seen a combination of before to see if they work. Often you do want complementary skills though, so it often works to choose a character of a certain type. The actual skills you're not, the only one you're not allowed to take is major magic. You basically circle around the board, each person taking a skill. One nice thing about 4 players is there's 3 of almost every skill. Seamanship has 4, and that means that, you know, your choices are limited as to skills. And since you gain skills from here, you might not be able to get certain skills that otherwise would be available if other players have them. And that's kind of one of the, gee, I'm not sure if I like that or not. 4 seems like a compromise situation where players can't get all the skills they want perhaps, or that they deserve, but they also aren't going to be as likely to be limited to not getting something that they should deserve. In 5 and 6 players, you can easily get shut out of something, which is kind of disturbing. You pick your victory formula. Like I said, this is going to be expanded in terms of how you do it, but the base game is 20 points of Destiny and Story. Now, Destiny points come and go. Story points are just what has happened to you, so they're always going to be given to you. One of the skills allows you to convert them, though, which is kind of cool. And once you fulfill whatever your value is for victory in the points, or I believe for that matter, if you meet the requirements for either of the other 2 types of victory, you have to return to Baghdad, which is where everybody starts, the City of Peace, and declare your victory. Now, alternatively, you can win by becoming the Sultan. I'm not sure if becoming the Sultan is a legitimate way of winning anything but the basic game. I think if you're playing as a merchant or playing the quests, you have to fulfill those. Being the Sultan isn't good enough. Okay. When you enter Baghdad and declare that you're going to win, everyone else has a last turn after you. And they can basically interfere with you in various ways and either prevent you from winning, in which case the game resets and everybody keeps going until somebody else can declare victory, or the person who declared gets to win, or multiple people manage to succeed in their victory conditions and get back home and win. Or you're able to knock the first player who declared victory out and somebody else wins. Most of those options don't actually happen very often. Okay, so in the general play, what happens is you're allowed to move. There's some of these other steps here. You pass the Book of Tales to the person who's going to be reading. You check your statuses and treasures to see if there's anything that's affecting you. But then you're allowed to move, and movement is largely based on your wealth. So the richer you are, to a point, the faster you can move, and always by sea. And what you do is you move along these connections. So land connections are dotted and sea connections are solid, and you're allowed to move the number of spaces based on your wealth. So if my wealth was poor, where I start, I'm allowed to walk 3 spaces. But on a boat, it's going to be harder for me to get movement capability at sea, so because I don't have money, so I'm trying to stow away or whatever, so I can only move 2 spaces. But if I get up to a respectable wealth, I can move 4 in each. If I go up to princely, I can only move 3 on land because I've got so much of an entourage with me that, you know, I need to arrange for complicated pack animals and everything. But at sea, I'm able to hire faster and faster ships the richer I get. Okay. It is impossible to go to fabulous wealth unless I own a treasure. And then there's another one here. If I have the skill seamanship, I can always move 4 spaces by sea, because presumably I can hire onto a boat or steal one of my own or whatever. Okay. Once you succeed in moving, you have an encounter. Now, the way an encounter is checked is you draw a card from the deck. If it's one of these with words all over it and no picture, it goes into your hand, and you're allowed to hold something like 3 of these at any one time. If you go over that, you have to discard one, so you probably want to keep your hand at 2. Now, you'll notice there's a word up here. That's for the quest game, or if you're having to solve a quest anyway. But here, what this says is if I go to this city later on, I'll be able to play this in my cards and dice phase, which we'll get to in a moment. But the standard encounter card, here's another one. I'm going to have to shuffle these. The standard encounter cards have a picture of a creature or a person on it, a name, with a little asterisk. The asterisk indicates where you might actually find that critter. And what you do is you compare where you are. So as an example, if I'm in the mountains, which is this symbol, I looked this up, and it says 47. And what that means is I go to paragraph number 47, and I'm going to roll a single die. Wait a minute, there are a lot of numbers there. Okay, there's things you add to your die roll. First of all, when you're outside this bright area, you add 2 to the die roll. Basically, you're in the more unknown and dangerous areas of the world. Secondly, if your destiny's gotten high, either 5 or 9, you get to add to your die roll, or you must add to your die roll. And finally, if there's a number next to the area, it's a particularly dangerous place or special place. The higher the number, the better, the higher the risk, but also the better the potential payoff, in general. Anyway, I roll that die, and let's see, I'm in the mountains, and I get to face something, like, for example, a foolish thief, D. Well, the D means that I look it up on here, and I look up the first word of the name, foolish, and then I look and I have various options. I can punish the foolish thief, I can aid him, I can rob him, I can attack, abduct, or buy him. Buy only works on slaves, so I'm not allowed to pick that choice if it's not a foolish slave, okay? So I make my choice, and that gives me a base paragraph that I go to. Now let's say I did an aid the foolish thief. That gives me a paragraph base of 508. The person who's reading, who is not the same person who's playing, except in the solitaire game, takes me down to paragraph 508. And now he checks the one above that and the one below that. Yeah, I remember these rules fairly well. This is only important if your skill levels have increased to master level. Your skill levels are allowed to increase to master level if you acquire the skill when you already have the skill and you have at least 7 destiny points. If you haven't got any master level skills, the reader doesn't have to bother with this. So what's happening, let's see, 508. Now, if I had some master skills, the reader would have to check to see if there's any skills that I have mastery of. Weapon use, wisdom, luck, and then these have no skills listed next to them. So I would announce those, weapon use, wisdom, and luck, if the player has any master skills. And the player can say, okay, I'm going to use my master level luck to affect this. And that'll guarantee that he gets the paragraph with that master level skill. If he doesn't have master skills or doesn't have any that he can use or wants to or whatever, he rolls a die, and on a 1 or a 2 you subtract 1 from the base number, on a 5 or 6 you add 1 to the base number, and otherwise you read the paragraph that comes up out of those. So for example here, the reader would say, the other thanks you profusely, then scuttles off and asks, do you have luck? And if you do, you have the option to use it. You don't have to. Some of them will say luck mandatory. At this step in the game, not back with the master skills, you would have to use your ability at that against it. If you had luck, you would get this one better result. Otherwise, you never hear from him again, Destiny 1. And that's the main engine of the game, is paging through and testing your skills against the different things. So you try to align your skills with the kind of places you go. Alrighty. In the cards and dice phase, if you have any of these special cards, you're allowed to play them. I think you're only allowed to play 1 per turn. No, you can play as many as you like. Now, one with a city name on it says means that you have to go to that city. If you're in that city during cards and dice, you can play this, and you roll a die, and you get the effect of it. I believe. You can play special cards, which often are attacks on other people. of some sort, like this gets to choose the reaction in the next encounter. You could really kind of screw someone over with that, right? You're also, well, we'll get to that in the advanced rules. You're able to sometimes use your skills on other people in your space. One thing I didn't touch in the basic game is there are these places of power, which are the big pictures on the board. They only have an arrow coming out of them. You may get adventure opportunities to enter those places of power. And if you do, you end up in them at the end of the encounter. That's where you're going to be coming out of on your next move. Those tend to be really, really cool encounters where there's great stuff to be gained or possibly lost. Oh, you can never have more than 2 fate cards at one time. So if you get a third one, you have to discard it immediately without playing it. So yeah, you probably want to keep yourself down to 1. When you encounter a place of power, you actually look up the base value as if it's a card of the place of power. So this would be 178 for the, yeah, my book is badly damaged and we're probably going to have some trouble coping with that. So 178, and what it's going to do is it gives me a description of the special place I have, and it gives me various choices that I can take. And those become very, very easy to remember as you've played. And likewise, a lot of the reactions become easy to remember as well. So I'm hoping, since I haven't played it in a few years, and I only played it really heavily back in the 90s, that most of this has kind of faded from my mind. I doubt it, though. It usually tends to stick pretty well. Because I did play a very fair amount of this game. Okay. You might get skills within your encounters. You might get conditional skills. So during the cards and dice phase, certain statuses and skills say 7 or less or whatever. What that means is at the end of your turn, you roll the dice, a pair of them, and if you roll that number or less, you get to keep the skill past that turn, or keep the status past that turn. Statuses are things that happen to you. They're going to have a paragraph number assigned to them, and you read that out, and then that affects you, and you may have to look it up more than once. Okay. Storytelling game. We'll ignore that. That doesn't do a whole hell of a lot. What it does is it adds this judging of, you know, how well different people play the story, and they end up getting points for it. Okay. Moving on to the adventure rules, which is what we're going to be playing. So there's 2 other ways to win this game, right? There's quests. There's the questing player. But if you're playing the adventure game, you add quests and they can be generated for other people as ways of getting rid of statuses or whatever. When you decide to choose to undertake a quest, okay. What happens is you're going to, if you have no quest card at the beginning of your turn, if you're trying to go victory for a quest, then you have to draw a random card until you get a card, a fate card that has a quest on it, like this. And then you put that down, and that's what you must seek. The name, there'll be a name and a paragraph number. The number is the paragraph on the Book of Tales, which lists the important information that you should have there. You should read it as soon as you get the quest card, or have the reader read it to you. And then the quest paragraph is going to have 2 parts: a special table for fulfilling the quest and a list of several spaces on the board. When you get to one of those spaces, you can roll on the table. So this is 1309, just as an example. because we don't know if somebody's going to be playing the quest game. Chances are somebody will. The merchant game is the one I'm less likely to. Okay. So here we are in these. And 1309 is going to be the Enchantress. Now, it leads to some bonuses. +1 to the die for each additional quest card in the current quest. I'm allowed to refuse to pursue the quest. Not refuse to pursue it, but to extend the quest to another card. In which case, I'll get additional cards on it, additional dice on it. I also get to learn what my abilities do to the die roll. +1 for minor magic, +2 for major magic. This is where I can find it in Shiraz or an island with a black number. And there are plenty of islands with black numbers. Shiraz is a city, I'd have to find it. In order to find things, there is a little compendium gazetteer to give you at least vaguely where things are in terms of quadrants of the game board, or quintrants. Okay, and you roll a die adding your bonuses if you wish to pursue the quest. Now what you'll see is there are very bad results on the first couple, on the up to about 5. 6 says, well, that's not good either. So unless you have some pluses built up, you're not going to get the success here. The success is going to be a Q:S. That means you've succeeded in that layer of the quest and you can take the next quest. Q:X says you extend the quest, and that means you're going to have to draw another quest card on that particular quest. Now, you fulfill the quest that you're on by having that encounter on that table, or you can actually so there's 2 ways. One is you can go find the person who's listed in the right location and roll on that table. The other is if you happen to find the Enchantress or whatever your current quest is through the normal deck play and have a Q:S come up through that encounter, you succeed in the quest and you end up fulfilling that quest. Now, once you finish your first quest, you get a new quest. And once you completed 2 complete quests, you are in victory status and you can go to Baghdad and win. That's hard to prevent you from winning because unlike, the others, they can't take away your destiny points. You have your 2 successful quests. You sort of won. Yet there are statuses that don't allow you to win, like being on pilgrimage, that somebody could give you. Okay. I'm going to take a little pause here before I go into the merchant, and then I'm not going to do interactive card play. I don't like that rule terribly much. We never played with that much. We tried it once, but I am going to use using skills on players. So the merchant rules are another set of victory conditions. Using skills on players is the... I like playing with this no matter what. Even if you drop, quest and merchant from the game, I think that it's fun because you get to attack people. We also have the multiple statuses. No status limit. In a sense, these are all optional rules that you can add to the game in the advanced game. All right, I'll be back. Moving on to the merchant game. So the merchant game really is only accessible to someone who picks that victory condition. And this is done in your secret victory condition choices. Your goal in this game is to get to fabulous wealth. And remember, that means you need a treasure. A magical treasure. Now, in addition to just getting it through normal means in the play, which is actually not unreasonable, you also have the ability to play over on this chart. And that will be with these little counters. Each city in the map is going to have some products listed next to them. So for example, Bilma has ivory and hides here. I never remember these rules. Trade is going to be a matter of connecting products on the display with trade route counters, which is to say, if you're in a city that has ivory, you want to, say, connect up to a city that has aloe and build a trade route across, and then if you can land in the city with aloe, you're allowed to score that trade. We'll show you how this works. You're allowed, whenever you're in a city, to start a trade route by spending one level of wealth for each trade counter that you draw from the cup. Also, if you have the bargaining at talent level, you get a free draw, and if you have it at master level, you get 2 free draws every time that you're in a city. Right? Yeah. I believe it. You have to be in a city. Yeah. You have to end a turn in a city and have an encounter in there. In general, you can't do things like play a card unless you tried to have an encounter or had an encounter in the city. Once you draw the trade route counters, you can place them on the merchant display. You put them in empty boxes, never the actual products, and they point away from one of the products available in the city that you occupy. Then you can continue chains that have already been started by pointing the arrow from one to the next, and you just kind of, you're allowed to traverse the trade location. So for example, this piece can be played like this piece is allowed to be played like this, and I'm moving this sugar forward, and I can't play this piece because it's got to go into a corner, and I'm not allowed to do that. So if I was in, I don't know, a wine city, I could start a new trade route coming out of there if I drew that piece. And this one, and I'm kind of jerking my way all over the place here. I don't know. Anyway, your goal is to eventually get it to a type of city, and then you can get there and you can score it. Now, this doesn't score you a lot, and I'll explain why in a moment. Okay. You have to play them all immediately. I haven't explained these things yet. You're able to play those on your trade routes as well. Okay. You can't use your bargaining tokens to extend a current chain. Those can only be used to start a new route. When there are no more trade counters in the box, bottom, or cup, you take the used ones that aren't on the board and put them back in and reshuffle. If there's no new ones available at all, you're not allowed to extend trade routes, which could be a problem. Now, when you go from one product box to another, you go to a city with the destination product, and you can cash it in, and you remove all the trade counters along the chain from that display and place them to the side. If you have 2 or more destinations going to the same place, you can cash in as many as you like at once. But you can't draw any arrows in that city that turn. You have to have an encounter in order to cash in. Which means if you draw a card, one of those event cards or whatever, you can't play that. You can't use that as your encounter. You have to wait until you actually have an encounter, which is kind of a problem when you have a city card in your hand, because they follow the same rules. So you go to a city with the city card, you try to have an encounter, you draw another special card, and you're like, ah, crap. Okay, where are we? When you cash in, you gain wealth. You get a number equal to the number of arrows and product boxes in the chain, which is the problem here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, and you don't count the starting or destination. So presumably, I may have gotten this one for free, but these three I paid for, so I'm not going to gain a lot of wealth unless I actually shoot through other product boxes. And then those I get to score without having had to pay anything for them. Okay, some of the trade route markers have a wealth value on them. If you have the evaluation at talent level, you can use a counter marked 1 wealth here, TM. If you have it at master level, you can also use the 2 wealth markers. These are placed as trade markers, which you can use no matter what, or they can be played wealth side up in any product box on the display. When you cash in a chain containing such counters, you get additional wealth according to these counters, for whatever that's worth. If more than one player is a merchant, someone can cash in the other merchant's counters, and boy, that becomes a pain in the ass. When you have multiple merchants in the game, it really screws the game up in terms of the merchants become less valuable as characters. And that's one of the reasons why people kind of shy away from playing a merchant. We may see 2 merchants in the game. I'm going to kind of randomize what people decide to be. In order to win the game, you have to get fabulous wealth, which means you have a treasure and you enter Baghdad, and you must still have it after the turn. There's an if merchant qualifier on the fate cards. Those affect you if you are a merchant. The if quest ones affect you if you are questing. I don't know if there's a if not merchant or quest. I don't think so. Interactive card play. I'm not going to play with this, but I'll briefly explain it. Basically what happens is each player has a hand of cards, 5 cards at the start of the game. The cards that you hold in your hand are something separate from your normal event cards that you have. You don't draw from the deck to see if you had an encounter. Instead, you ask another player for an encounter card. If he has one, he must give you one of his choice to be your encounter. Otherwise, he discards his entire hand, draws 5 new cards, and you don't have an encounter. You've just wiped out his hand of specials. If you have 1 or more fate cards, you must give one to the player who gave you the encounter. If he had no encounter for you that turn, he does not get a fate card. If you have no fate cards, you discard your hand and draw 5 new cards, and he doesn't get one. The fate cards you get from other players are kept face up in front of you and are used as if they are fate cards in the standard game. They're not given to other players, you don't discard them, etc. If you're using this rule with the quest rule, the questing player should ask someone for a quest card. He does not give a fate card in return. If the asked player doesn't have a quest card, he discards his hand, draws 5 new, and he still must give the player a quest card from his new hand. If he has no quest card still, he discards again and keeps going until he has one. I'm not going to play with that. That's an annoying option as far as I'm concerned, but it does allow for more interactive and competitive play. I don't know how much it really helps. This game isn't a competitive game in my view, so trying to make it such with that, it doesn't do much. But it is one of the big complaints some people have against this game, which is that you're just basically kind of wandering around getting affected by things, which I think is a lot of fun, but I could see where it annoys people, where it's like, well, it's not even fun to try to win the game. That's my view. Okay, and then there's the no status limit. So this, normally in the base game, when you get a status, you lose all your previous statuses, or else, I don't remember, or else you're immune to statuses. It's one or the other. In this version, you don't discard them when you have more than one. You lose them when you're directed by a paragraph or a conditional status roll. Now this can become a pain in the ass. They say this can become difficult when you have, a lot of statuses to resolve the effects, just to keep track of them all. That's true. But what I find more disturbing is some of them kind of conflict with each other a little bit. And you have to use some common sense to handle this. Okay. Now the last of the special rules here is using skills on other players. Some skills can be used to attack other players. And If you have the same skill, you're allowed to pay destiny points to avoid the effect. So if the skill is being used against you and you have the same skill at talent level, you can spend 5 destiny points to avoid the effect. If it's used at if you have it at master level, it only costs you 2 destiny points. This is painful unless you've already got all the destiny points you want or need, because you kind of don't want to spend these suckers for no good reason. On the other hand, some of the things can be pretty bad. So the skills, acting in disguise, the person who plays it against you, to play it against you, it costs 5 or 2 destiny points, depending on, talent or master skill. Now, here it's a little different, because some of these skills you might be able to prevent someone else from winning by using on them, or you might be in the position where you have extra points and you might as well spend them. Acting disguise, if you use it against someone, that person gains a story point, but you get to take a treasure from them or gain 2 story points. They might not want to avoid gaining a story point, right? Appearance, you can give the player love-struck status or envious, and this is really a crappy thing to have happen if you don't have multiple statuses in the game, because they are easy to get rid of. Bargaining, you can take a wealth level or trade a wealth level for a treasure of your choice from the chosen victim. Beguiling, you can give the victim enslaved status, or you can steal one of their statuses, but not Sultan. Luck, you roll dice. If you win the die roll, you get a wealth level from them. Otherwise, there's no effect. Okay, there's a rule about getting wealth levels from players, which is if they're poorer than you, and you are allowed to take one of their wealth levels, you can make them a level poorer, but you don't get richer. They have to be at least as rich as you to increase your wealth when they lose one to you. Major magic, you can give them any status you like. Minor magic, you can give them ensorcelled or under Gaius status. Piety, you can give the other on pilgrimage status, which is a big deal because you can't win while you're on pilgrimage, but on pilgrimage is not necessarily a bad status other than that. Or you can give them a destiny point and take 3 destiny points for yourself. Well, that's not that great a deal, because I had to spend at least 2 destiny points to do that. However, I might be allowed to attack for free under certain certain of these fate cards allow you to attack for free. Seduction, you can use this only against characters of the opposite sex. You can give them enslaved or love-struck, or take a wealth level from them. Stealth and stealing, you can take a wealth level from them. All this is limited by that, how rich they are. Or you can steal a treasure from them. If the other player pays the destiny points to avoid the effects of this, you get imprisoned status. Ooh, that's kind of risky. Storytelling, you give the other player a story point, but he may not move in his next turn. He can have his encounter normally. If you think somebody's close to winning, that might be a way to freeze him for a turn. Weapon use, you can give the other wounded status. The final thing, obviously, I'm not playing is the solitaire game. You don't take a hand of cards. Let's see. Repeat the setup for standard game plus a merchant quest rules, but do not take a hand of cards. To win the solitaire game, you must fulfill all 3 victory conditions. That is, you must fulfill your formula, gain fabulous wealth, and complete 2 quests. And you have to do this before you finish the deck. I haven't talked about the deck yet. I probably should. You draw 2 cards and choose one. If another player has to make a decision, you lose a story or destiny point and make the decision yourself. Just a number of special rules to make it kind of work in the solo play, especially with the master skill where you're actually allowed to read the paragraphs completely to decide which ones you want to use. Now, let's talk about the deck. So, the game ends when you run out of 3 decks. I gotta find this somewhere. And I think nobody wins if you don't make it through the decks. The decks can affect what your card you encounter is. So, let's see. When you encounter humans, I think generally, this is first deck encounter, second deck encounter, third deck encounter. Now when you're playing with a certain number of people, you play with less decks. And I don't really have that in place here, but I think we're playing with the full 3 decks in 4 people, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. Ah, there it is. 2-player game, no? Yeah, I don't remember. 2-player game, you go through cards more quickly. I seem to remember 2, maybe 3 players, you play with less decks. Like you start already on the second deck. But I am not seeing that. Anyway, if you manage to go through all 3 decks, nobody wins. And that's cool. And that's about it. I think I'll send this up, but I am going to look a little bit more for the deck thing. And we'll see the setup, you know, as I choose. I'll be choosing it, you know, in real time on video.